My grandson leaned toward me, his voice trembling. "Grandma," he whispered, "do you want to know what Dad is hiding in the garage?" When he finally opened those doors, the truth hit me like a thunderclap. I didn't speak. I screamed. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I've always believed that grandmothers possess a particular kind of radar, an intuition sharpened by decades of reading faces, decoding silences, and sensing when something in the family orbit has shifted. At 68, I thought I'd seen everything this life had to offer. I was wrong. My name is Margot, and I live in Cedar Falls, Pennsylvania, a town where everyone knows your business before you do, and where secrets have a way of surfacing like bodies in a lake. My husband Robert died 18 months ago after a brutal fight with pancreatic cancer. The illness consumed him slowly. Then, all at once, leaving behind medical bills that could choke a horse and a silence in our farmhouse that pressed against my chest every morning when I woke. Robert had 3 passions in his life: me, our son Daniel, and his classic cars. Those vehicles weren't just metal and chrome to him. They were time machines, each one representing a different chapter of his life. The 1967 Shelby Mustang GT500 he'd restored with his father before the old man passed. The 1972 Chevrolet Chevelle SS he'd bought the year Daniel was born, forest green with white racing stripes. And the 1969 Dodge Charger RT, midnight blue, the car he'd proposed to me beside on a warm June evening 46 years ago. After Robert died, Daniel sat me down at the kitchen table, his face grave, his wife Lisa hovering behind him like a pale shadow. He explained with what seemed like genuine anguish that the medical bills had exceeded what insurance covered. The treatments, the experimental drugs, the final hospice care, it all added up to a mountain of debt that threatened to swallow the farm whole. "Mom," he said, gripping my hands across the worn oak table, "I have to sell Dad's cars. It's the only way to keep the house, to keep you from losing everything." I remember the feeling that washed over me then, a cocktail of grief and resignation. Those cars were Robert's legacy, but what good were they if I lost the home we'd built together? I nodded, tears streaming down my face, and gave Daniel my blessing. A few months later, he told me the cars were gone. Sold to a collector in Ohio for a fair price, he said. Enough to pay off the bulk of the medical debt and give us breathing room. I mourned those vehicles almost as much as I mourned my husband, but I accepted it as the price of survival. That was about 8 months ago. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. I tended the small vegetable garden behind the house, volunteered at the Cedar Falls Public Library on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and watched my grandson Jamie grow from a quiet boy into a perceptive 12-year-old with his grandfather's eyes and his father's stubborn jaw. Jamie started spending more time with me after Robert died. Daniel and Lisa both worked long hours, he as a construction foreman, she as a dental hygienist, and they seemed relieved to have me watch Jamie after school. The boy would do his homework at my kitchen table, help me with small chores, and occasionally, when the mood struck him, ask me questions about his grandfather. It was during one of these after-school visits, on a Tuesday in late September, that everything changed. Jamie had been unusually quiet that afternoon, pushing his math homework around the table without really working on it. I was making us grilled cheese sandwiches when he finally spoke. "Grandma?" His voice was small, uncertain. "Yes, sweetheart? Can I tell you a secret?" I turned from the stove, studying his face. He looked troubled, his brow furrowed in a way that reminded me painfully of Robert when he was wrestling with something difficult. "You can tell me anything, Jamie. You know that." He bit his lip, glancing toward the window as if checking to make sure we were truly alone. "It's about Dad." Something cold slithered down my spine. "What about him?" He made me promise not to tell, but I think you should know." Jamie stood up from the table, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his notebook. "Grandma, do you want to know what Dad is hiding in the garage?" The world seemed to tilt slightly. "What garage, honey?" "The one at our house. The big one in the back, the one he always keeps locked." Jamie's voice dropped to a whisper. I wasn't supposed to see, but I did. Last week when he thought I was at soccer practice, my heart began to pound. "Jamie, what did you see?" He looked up at me with those earnest eyes. "Can I show you? After we eat? Dad and Mom won't be home until 6. We have time." I should have said no. I should have told him that if his father wanted something kept private, we needed to respect that. But something in Jamie's expression, a mixture of confusion and burden, told me this secret was eating at him. And if I'm honest with myself, curiosity had already sunk its claws into me. 20 minutes later, we were in my old Honda, driving the 3 miles to Daniel and Lisa's house on the outskirts of town. They lived in a modest ranch-style home with a large detached garage that Robert had helped Daniel build 10 years ago. The garage was meant for Daniel's contracting equipment, but it was big enough to house several vehicles. Jamie used his house key to let us in through the side door. The house was empty and silent, filled with the particular stillness that comes when a place is waiting for its inhabitants to return and give it life again. "This way," Jamie whispered, though there was no one to hear us. We went through the kitchen and out the back door. The garage loomed ahead, a structure of weathered wood and corrugated metal that had always struck me as oddly fortified. Daniel had installed a heavy padlock on the main doors, and the windows were covered from the inside. "How do we get in?" I asked. Jamie pulled a key from his pocket. "I found where Dad hides the spare. He doesn't know I know." My grandson was becoming quite the little detective. The thought would have amused me under different circumstances. The lock clicked open with surprising ease. Jamie pulled the door wide, reached inside to flip on the lights, and stepped back. "Look, Grandma." I stepped through the threshold, and for a moment I couldn't process what I was seeing. My brain simply refused to accept the evidence of my eyes. The garage was immaculate, lit by LED strips that ran along the ceiling. And there, arranged in a perfect line, gleaming under those lights like jewels in a case, were Robert's 3 classic cars. The Shelby Mustang, its vintage Wimbledon white paint job flawless. The Chevelle, the green so deep it looked like you could dive into it. The Charger, midnight blue and magnificent, exactly as I remembered it from the day Robert drove it to our wedding. I didn't speak. I couldn't. What emerged from my throat was something between a gasp and a scream. A sound of shock so profound it seemed to come from somewhere outside my body. "Grandma." Jamie's voice was frightened now. "Are you okay?" I staggered forward, reaching out to touch the hood of the Charger as if to confirm it was real. The metal was cool and solid beneath my palm. These weren't replicas or similar models. These were Robert's cars, down to the small dent on the Mustang's rear quarter panel, from when Daniel had backed into a fence post at 16, down to the custom leather seats in the Chevelle that Robert had installed himself. "He said he sold them," I whispered. "Daniel told me he sold them to pay the medical bills." Jamie stood beside me, his face pale. "I know. I heard him tell you that. But they've been here the whole time, Grandma. He comes out here sometimes at night, just sits in them. I've seen him through my bedroom window." My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of it. Why would Daniel lie about selling the cars? Why would he keep them hidden? And if he hadn't sold them, where'd the money come from to pay those crushing medical bills? I moved through the garage as if in a dream, examining each vehicle. They weren't just stored, they were maintained. The tires were properly inflated, the interiors clean, the chrome polished. Someone was taking care of them, and that someone was clearly my son. On a workbench against the far wall, I spotted something that made my breath catch. A folder, thick with papers. I walked over and opened it, my hands trembling. Inside were documents I didn't immediately understand. Loan papers, it looked like, with terms and interest rates that made my eyes widen. And there, at the bottom of the stack, a business card for someone named Vincent Calabresi, with a phone number and an address in Pittsburgh. No company name, no title. Just a name and contact information on an expensive-looking card. "Jamie," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "Does your father know about this folder?" "I don't know. I've never touched anything in here before. I just looked at the cars." I closed the folder and tucked it back exactly where I'd found it, my mind racing. Daniel had lied to me about selling Robert's most prized possessions. The cars were here, hidden, maintained in secret, and there were loan documents from someone who didn't advertise a business name. None of this made sense, and all of it made sense at the same time. "We need to go," I told Jamie. "Your parents will be home soon, and they can't know we were here. We locked the garage behind us, and I made Jamie promise to keep this between us, at least for now. The drive back to my farmhouse was silent, my mind churning through possibilities, each one darker than the last. When I dropped Jamie off at home just before 6, Daniel's truck was already in the driveway. My son came out to greet us, smiling, looking for all the world like a devoted father and son coming home from a long day. "Thanks for watching him, Mom," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I smiled back, playing my part. "Anytime, sweetheart. You know I love spending time with Jamie." But as I drove away, watching Daniel in my rearview mirror with his hand on his son's shoulder, I felt something I'd never felt toward my own child before. Suspicion laced with dread. The cars were in the garage. Robert's beloved cars. The ones that should have been sold to save our home and pay his medical debts were hidden in Daniel's garage like stolen goods. And I was going to find out why. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed I'd shared with Robert for 43 years, staring at the ceiling and watching shadows move across the plaster like accusations. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those cars gleaming under the LED lights, as pristine as the day Robert had last driven them. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I needed to understand what Daniel had done, but I had to be careful. If I confronted him directly, he might simply lie again, and I'd have shown my hand without learning the truth. No, I needed to investigate quietly, the way Robert used to say you should approach a spooked horse. Slowly, calmly, from an angle they don't expect. The business card I'd seen haunted me. Vincent Calabrese. The name itself sounded like something from a crime novel, and the absence of any company affiliation on that expensive cardstock suggested this wasn't a legitimate financial institution. I'd lived long enough to recognize the scent of trouble, and everything about that card reeked of it. Wednesday morning, after a breakfast I couldn't taste, I drove to the Cedar Falls Public Library. My volunteer shift didn't start until noon, but I wanted to use the computers before the morning crowd arrived. Margaret, the head librarian and my friend for 30 years, raised an eyebrow when she saw me come in so early. "Margot, you look terrible. Are you feeling all right?" I manufactured a smile. "Didn't sleep well. Thought I'd get some things done online before my shift." She squeezed my shoulder sympathetically and left me to one of the public computers. I wasn't particularly skilled with technology, but Robert had taught me the basics before he got sick, insisting I needed to be able to navigate the digital world. Now, I was grateful for those patient lessons. I typed Vincent Calabrese's name into the search engine and watched the results populate. Nothing immediately jumped out. No business listings, no professional profiles. But when I added Pittsburgh and loans, a different picture began to emerge. Several news articles from the past 3 years mentioned a Vincent Calabrese in connection with investigations into unlicensed lending operations. The articles were careful with their language. Phrases like alleged and suspected appeared frequently, but the pattern was clear. This man loaned money outside the traditional banking system, and the people who borrowed from him often regretted it. One article from 18 months ago made my blood run cold. It described how a small business owner in Pittsburgh had taken a loan from an unlicensed lender and ended up losing his entire business when he couldn't keep up with the compounding interest. The business owner's family claimed he'd been threatened and intimidated. No criminal charges had been filed because the borrower refused to testify, but the article mentioned Vincent Calabrese by name as a person of interest in the ongoing investigation. My hands were shaking as I printed the articles. Daniel had borrowed money from a loan shark. My son, who'd looked me in the eye and told me he'd sold his father's cars, had instead gotten tangled up with someone who could destroy him. But why? Why keep the cars? Why take such a terrible risk? I tucked the printouts into my purse just as Margaret appeared with a cup of coffee for me. "You're doing research?" she asked, noting the printer activity. "Just looking into some financial matters. Estate things, you know." Margaret nodded knowingly. "Robert's been gone over a year now. It's good that you're finally sorting through all that. If you need help understanding any of the paperwork, my daughter's a paralegal. She might be able to point you in the right direction." A paralegal. The word sparked an idea. "Actually, Margaret, that would be wonderful. Could I get her number?" 20 minutes later, I was in my car, dialing the number Margaret had given me. Jennifer Reeves answered on the third ring, her voice professional and crisp. I explained that I was a friend of her mother's and that I needed some basic advice about loans and debts. She agreed to meet me during her lunch break at a small cafe downtown. Jennifer turned out to be in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. Over sandwiches neither of us really ate, I showed her the business card I'd photographed with my phone and described the loan documents I'd seen, without, of course, mentioning that they belonged to my son. Her expression grew darker with each detail I shared. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, setting down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "The person who took this loan is in serious trouble. These unlicensed lenders, we call them loan sharks for a reason. They charge interest rates that would be illegal if they were operating through proper channels. And when borrowers can't pay," she trailed off meaningfully. "What happens when they can't pay? Harassment, threats, sometimes worse. And because everything operates in a legal gray area, it's hard for victims to get help. The borrowers are often too scared or too embarrassed to go to the police. What would you advise someone in this situation to do?" Jennifer leaned forward. "Come clean immediately. Go to the police, report the threatening behavior, get ahead of it. These situations only get worse with time. The longer someone waits, the deeper the hole becomes." I thanked her and insisted on paying for her lunch. As I drove home, her words echoed in my mind. Daniel was in a hole that was probably getting deeper by the day, and he hadn't told me, had actively hidden it from me by lying about the cars. That afternoon, I called Daniel's house. Lisa answered, her voice tight with stress. "Hi, Margot. Daniel's at a job site. Did you need something? I was hoping to invite you all for Sunday dinner. It's been a while since we've had a proper family meal." There was a pause. That's really nice. But we've been so busy lately. Daniel's working extra hours, and I've picked up additional shifts. Maybe in a few weeks. Is everything all right, Lisa? You sound strained. Everything's fine. The response came too quickly, too brightly. Just the usual stress, you know. Bills and work and Jamie's school activities. Nothing to worry about. But I did worry. I worried intensely. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold in front of me and tried to piece together the timeline. Robert had died 18 months ago. The medical bills had come due. Daniel had told me he'd sold the cars 8 months ago, but clearly he'd never sold them, which meant the money to pay those bills had come from somewhere else. From Vincent Calabrese, most likely, which meant Daniel had been dealing with this loan shark for 8 months, maybe longer. 8 months of compounding interest, 8 months of stress, 8 months of looking his mother in the eye and lying. Thursday morning, I decided to drive past Daniel's house. I didn't plan to stop. I just wanted to see if anything seemed amiss. It was foolish, probably, but I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. As I turned onto his street, I noticed a black Lincoln Town car parked at the curb 3 houses down from Daniel's place. Nothing unusual about that, except that Cedar Falls wasn't a Lincoln Town car kind of town. We drove pickup trucks and sensible sedans. This car was out of place, conspicuous in its attempt to look inconspicuous. And there was someone sitting in the driver's seat. I slowed down as I passed, trying not to be obvious about looking. The driver was a man in his 30s, thick-necked, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. He seemed to be watching Daniel's house. My heart began to race. Was this one of Calabrese's people? Was my son being watched? Threatened? I drove around the block and came back past the house from the other direction. The Lincoln was still there, the driver still sitting motionless. I pulled over 2 houses away and sat in my car, trying to decide what to do. That's when Daniel's truck pulled into his driveway. He got out, his shoulders hunched with exhaustion, and started toward his front door. The Lincoln's driver opened his door and stepped out. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw Daniel freeze. The man from the Lincoln approached him, and they had a brief, tense conversation. Daniel's body language screamed distress. His hands moved in placating gestures. His head shook repeatedly. The other man pointed at Daniel's chest, emphatic, aggressive. Then, as quickly as it had started, the confrontation ended. The man returned to his Lincoln and drove away. Daniel stood in his driveway for a long moment, his hands on his knees as if he might be sick, before finally going inside his house. I sat there trembling, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white. My son was being threatened in broad daylight. This wasn't just a financial problem anymore. This was dangerous. I needed to talk to him. I needed to make him understand that whatever mess he'd gotten himself into, I would help him find a way out. But I also needed to be smart about it. If I came at him with accusations and panic, he'd just shut down, put up walls. I drove home and tried to think clearly. That night, I called Daniel's cell phone directly. "Mom, is everything okay?" He sounded wary, as if he expected bad news. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I wanted to talk to you. Could you come by tomorrow for coffee, just the two of us? Tomorrow's Friday. I've got a full schedule. Please, Daniel, it's important." Silence stretched between us. Finally, he sighed. "Okay, I can stop by around 10, but I can't stay long." "That's perfect. Thank you." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and tried to prepare what I would say. How do you tell your adult son that you know he's been lying to you? How do you offer help to someone who's been deliberately hiding their problems? I thought about Robert, about what he would do in this situation. He'd always been the calm one, the steady presence who could diffuse conflicts with a combination of firmness and love. I needed to channel that now. But first, I needed one more piece of information. I went to my bedroom and pulled out the old shoebox where Robert had kept important papers. Birth certificates, marriage license, deeds and titles. I found what I was looking for near the bottom. The original titles for all 3 cars, still in Robert's name because he'd never gotten around to transferring them to Daniel. Those cars legally belonged to Robert's estate, which meant they legally belonged to me. That realization hit me like a thunderbolt. Daniel had been maintaining, hiding, and presumably using as collateral vehicles he didn't actually own. Whatever agreement he'd made with Vincent Calabrese was built on a foundation that couldn't hold legal scrutiny. This gave me leverage, but it also complicated everything. If those cars were collateral for Daniel's loan, and if I revealed that he didn't own them, what would Calabrese do? I was still wrestling with these thoughts when my phone rang. It was nearly 11 at night, late for anyone to be calling. "Hello? Mrs. Bennett?" The voice was unfamiliar, male, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "This is Vincent Calabrese. I believe we have a mutual interest in discussing your son's financial situation." The blood drained from my face. "How did you get this number?" "That's not important. What is important is that Daniel is significantly behind on his obligations to me. I thought perhaps a conversation between us might help motivate him to find a solution." "I don't know what you're talking about." My voice was steadier than I felt. "Mrs. Bennett, let's not play games. Your son used some very valuable vehicles as collateral for a substantial loan. Those vehicles are currently worth more than what he owes me, which puts me in an interesting position. I could simply take them and sell them, but I'm a reasonable man. If Daniel, or perhaps his family, can come up with the outstanding balance, we can resolve this cleanly." "How much does he owe you?" "With accumulated interest and fees, $78,000, to be paid within 2 weeks, or I will be forced to take possession of the collateral." The number hit me like a physical blow. $78,000, nearly twice what Daniel had claimed to get from selling the cars. "And if I told you those cars aren't legally his to offer as collateral?" There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "Then Daniel has bigger problems than just owing me money. But that would also make things complicated for everyone, wouldn't it? Much simpler if the debt is just paid. 2 weeks, Mrs. Bennett. I trust you'll encourage your son to be reasonable." The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness of my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, and felt the full weight of the situation crush down on me. This wasn't just about Daniel's poor choices anymore. This was about a predatory criminal who now had me in his sights, who saw me as either a solution to his problem or an obstacle to remove, and I had exactly 2 weeks to figure out which one I was going to be. Friday morning arrived with rain that matched my mood. Gray, persistent, oppressive. I'd spent the night making notes, trying to organize my thoughts into something resembling a plan. By the time Daniel knocked on my door at 10, I'd gone through 3 pots of coffee and had dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. "Mom, you look exhausted," Daniel said as he stepped inside, water dripping from his jacket. "Are you sure you're feeling all right?" "Sit down, Daniel." I kept my voice level, gesturing to the kitchen table where I'd already set out 2 cups. "We need to talk." Something in my tone made him hesitate. "Mom, if this is about Sunday dinner, I already told you we're swamped right now. It's about the cars." The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. He stood there, frozen in the doorway, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "Sit down," I repeated, and this time it wasn't a request. He sank into the chair like a puppet with cut strings. "I can explain, then explain. And Daniel, so help me, if you lie to me one more time, I will never forgive you." The words hung between us, sharp and unforgiving. My son, my only child, the boy I'd raised to be honest and decent, looked at me with eyes full of shame and terror. "How did you find out?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Jamie showed me. He was worried about you, about the secret you were keeping. So last Tuesday, he took me to your garage." Daniel's hands came up to cover his face. "Oh God, Jamie knows?" "What he knows is that his father lied to his grandmother. What he doesn't know, what I didn't know until last night, is that you borrowed money from a loan shark and used your father's cars as collateral. Cars that don't legally belong to you." His head snapped up. "What?" I pulled the car titles from my purse and laid them on the table. "Robert never transferred ownership. These cars are part of his estate. They're mine, Daniel. Which means any agreement you made with Vincent Calabrese is worthless." The look on his face was pure panic. "No. No, no. Mom, you don't understand. If he finds out I don't own them, he already knows I exist. He called me last night." Daniel's face went from white to gray. "He called you? What did he say?" "That you owe him $78,000. That he wants it in 2 weeks or he's taking the cars." I leaned forward, forcing him to meet my eyes. "Now you're going to tell me everything. From the beginning. And I mean everything." He broke then, his composure shattering like dropped glass. The story spilled out of him in fragments, pain and guilt bleeding through every word. It had Stafforded 18 months ago, just before Robert died. The medical bills were worse than Daniel had told me. Much worse. The experimental treatments Robert had wanted to try weren't covered by insurance. The total debt was approaching $200,000, and the hospital was threatening to put liens on both our properties. Daniel had tried to get a loan from the bank, but his credit wasn't good enough. Construction work was seasonal and unpredictable, and he'd had some lean years. No traditional lender would touch him. "I was desperate," he said, his voice cracking. "I couldn't let them take the farm. I couldn't let you lose everything. And then this guy at a bar, someone I'd done work for, he mentioned he knew someone who could help. Someone who didn't care about credit scores. Vincent Calabrese had seemed like an answer to prayer at first. He'd offered Daniel $100,000, enough to pay off the medical debt and have a cushion. The interest rate was high, Calabrese had admitted, but Daniel had convinced himself he could manage it. He'd take on extra work. Lisa would pick up more shifts. They'd cut expenses. However, the interest was brutal, the kind that doubled the debt faster than he could pay it down. Within months, the amount had skyrocketed far beyond what he'd borrowed. "But you didn't sell the cars," I said. "I couldn't." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, those cars were Dad's whole world. They were the only things he had left of his own father, the things he was going to pass down to Jamie someday. Selling them felt like erasing him, like saying his life's passion meant nothing. So you lied to me instead. I thought I could pay off the loan before you ever had to know. I thought I could protect both you and Dad's legacy. But the interest..." He shook his head, defeated. "The interest compounds monthly. What started as $120,000 turned into $140, then $160. I've been paying him $5,000 a month for 8 months, and I've barely made a dent in the principal." I did the math quickly. $40,000 in payments. He says I still owe about $80,000. The interest rate must have been astronomical. Criminal, certainly, if it had been a legal loan. Why didn't you come to me? Because you'd already lost Dad. I couldn't dump this on you, too. You were grieving, trying to hold yourself together. I thought I could handle it. His voice broke completely. I thought I was protecting you. The irony was bitter. My son had lied to protect me, just as I'd been investigating in secret to protect him. We'd been circling each other like wary animals, both trying to shield the other from pain, and in the process had created this nightmare. Who else knows? I asked. Lisa knows everything. She's terrified. The threat started about 6 weeks ago after I missed a payment. First just phone calls, then that guy showing up at the house. Yesterday he told me that if I don't come up with the full balance in 2 weeks, Calabrese is going to take the cars, and if I try to stop him— Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. He said they'd make sure I understood what happens to people who don't honor their debts. Physical threats. My son was being threatened with violence, and I'd been sleeping peacefully in my farmhouse, completely unaware. We need to go to the police, I said. No. Daniel's response was immediate and vehement. Mom, you don't understand how this works. Calabrese has connections. People who owe him money and can't pay. They don't just get roughed up. They disappear, or their families get hurt, or their businesses burn down. He operates in a world where the police can't touch him. That's ridiculous. This is Pennsylvania, not some mob movie. It's not ridiculous. Daniel slammed his hand on the table, making me jump. I'm sorry. But Mom, I've seen what he can do. One of the guys who warned me about him, he tried to go to the police last year. 2 weeks later, his truck got firebombed in his driveway. The police said it was probably teenagers, never found who did it. The guy knew better. He scraped together the money and paid. I sat back, trying to process this. My quiet town, my peaceful corner of Pennsylvania, apparently housed predators I'd never imagined existed. There has to be a way out of this, I said. There isn't. Not one that I can see. Daniel looked utterly defeated. I've tried everything. I went back to the bank, got denied again. I looked into consolidation loans, second mortgages. Nobody will touch me with the debt I'm carrying. And even if I could get a loan, I'd just be trading one debt for another. What about selling the cars now? Legitimately? I tried. Quietly, to a few collectors I know. The Shelby alone is worth maybe $40,000. The Chevelle $35,000. The Charger around $45,000. That's $120,000 if I can get fair market value. But selling cars like these takes time. You need the right buyers. You need to do it properly. I don't have time. And even if I sold them today, it's only enough to pay Calabrese. It doesn't solve our actual financial problems. He was right. Paying off the loan shark would stop the immediate threat, but it wouldn't erase the fact that Daniel was drowning in debt, barely keeping his head above water. What does Lisa think you should do? Daniel's jaw tightened. Lisa thinks I should let him take the cars. She says we should just walk away, move somewhere else, start over. She's scared and I can't blame her. But Mom, if I let him take Dad's cars— His voice broke again. I'll have failed you both. I'll have lost the only things that really mattered to Dad. And I'll have done it because I was stupid and desperate and thought I could outsmart a loan shark. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on both of us. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. Then something occurred to me. Daniel, you said the cars are worth about $120,000 total. You owe Calabrese $78,000. That's a significant difference. So? So why would he want to take the cars instead of taking cash? If he seizes them, he has to sell them himself, deal with titles and transfers and finding buyers. That's work and risk for him. Wouldn't he prefer the money? Daniel blinked. I guess? But where would we get $78,000? I don't know yet, but there's something else that's bothering me. I pulled out the notes I'd made after Calabrese's call. He knew who I was. He knew my phone number. He knew about the cars being collateral. That means he's done research on you, on our family. He knows our weak points. That's terrifying, not helpful. No, think about it. He's putting pressure on you because he believes you'll break. But what if we flip that? What if we pressure him instead? Mom, you can't pressure a loan shark. That's insane. But an idea was forming in my mind. dangerous and probably foolish. But it was something. What if we had evidence of his illegal lending operation? Something concrete that we could use as leverage. Daniel stared at me. You want to blackmail Vincent Calabresi. I want to negotiate from a position of strength instead of weakness. There's a difference. Mom, no, absolutely not. You don't know what you're dealing with. A knock on the door interrupted him. We both froze, exchanging panicked glances. I rose slowly and went to peer through the window. It was Lisa, and she looked absolutely furious. I opened the door. Lisa, I didn't know you were coming. Where is he? She pushed past me, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Daniel. Your truck is here. I knew you'd come running to Mommy the second she found out. Lisa, please, Daniel started. No. She whirled on him, her face flushed with anger and fear. No more. I've been patient. I've been supportive. I've watched you destroy yourself over these damn cars for 8 months, and I'm done. Lisa, let's talk about this calmly, I said. She turned on me, and the venom in her expression shocked me. This is your fault. Excuse me? You and Robert, filling Daniel's head with all that legacy nonsense, making him think those cars were more important than our family's safety. We should have sold them the day Robert died, paid off the debts, and moved on. But no, Daniel had to honor his father's memory. She spat the last words like a curse. That's not fair, Daniel said quietly. Not fair? Not fair? Lisa's voice rose to a near shriek. What's not fair is that I've been living in terror for months because you couldn't let go of some metal and chrome. What's not fair is that our son asks me why Daddy looks so scared all the time. What's not fair is that I wake up every morning wondering if today's the day those thugs come back. I'd never seen Lisa like this. She was usually so composed, so controlled. This explosion of rage and fear was coming from somewhere deep and desperate. I'm going to fix this, Daniel said, but he sounded hollow. How? How? Lisa grabbed her purse and pulled out her phone. I have the number for a lawyer. A friend from work gave it to me. He specializes in bankruptcy and debt negotiation. I'm calling him today, and we're filing for bankruptcy. Let Calabresi take the stupid cars. Let him take whatever he wants. We'll declare bankruptcy, the slate gets wiped clean, and we start over. Bankruptcy won't erase this debt, I said quietly. Not if it's not legally registered. Calabresi doesn't operate through official channels. Lisa's face crumpled. Then we run. We move to another state, change our names, disappear. With what money? Daniel asked. We're barely making rent as it is. The three of us stood there in my kitchen. The full horror of the situation finally laid bare. We were trapped. No legal recourse, no financial solution, no way to simply walk away. Lisa sank into a chair, her anger deflating into exhaustion. I'm sorry, Margot. I shouldn't have blamed you. I'm so scared. I put my hand on her shoulder. I know, but we're going to figure this out. All of us. Together. How? It was barely a whisper. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, both broken by fear and bad choices and impossible circumstances, and I thought about Robert, about what he would do if he were here. He'd always said that when you can't go through a problem and you can't go around it, you have to go under it. Find the angle nobody expects. Those cars meant everything to Robert, I said slowly. They were his passion, his joy, but they were also investments. He used to tell me that classic cars appreciate in value if you maintain them properly. He saw them as more than just vehicles. He saw them as assets. Where are you going with this? Daniel asked. I'm not sure yet, but I think there might be a way to use the cars themselves to solve this problem, not by selling them, and not by letting Calabresi take them. Something else. I looked at them both. I need time to think. In the meantime, don't do anything. Don't call lawyers, don't contact Calabresi, and for God's sake, don't run. Just give me 2 days. 2 days to do what? Lisa asked. To find the angle nobody expects. After they left, still frightened but slightly less desperate, I sat alone in my kitchen and let my mind work through the problem from every direction. The cars were valuable. They were Robert's legacy. Daniel couldn't bear to lose them. But we couldn't pay the debt without selling them. Calabresi wanted his money. Lisa wanted her family safe. Jamie was caught in the middle of adult problems he shouldn't have to understand. And somewhere in all of that, there had to be a solution that didn't end with my family destroyed or my husband's life's work seized by a criminal. I thought about Robert sitting in those cars, his hands on the steering wheels, his face peaceful in a way it so rarely was anywhere else. And suddenly, I knew what he would say if he were here. Those cars were meant to be driven, Margot. They were meant to be seen and heard and admired. That's what brought me joy. Not keeping them locked away, but sharing them with people who understood what they represented. Sharing them. The idea that sparked in my mind was outrageous. It was probably impossible. But it was something, and something was more than we'd had 5 minutes ago. I reached for my phone and dialed Margaret at the library. Margot, is everything all right? Margaret, I need your help with something. Do you remember when Cedar Falls hosted that classic car show about 10 years ago? The one that brought in hundreds of people from all over the state? Of course. Robert entered his Mustang. He was so proud when it won the People's Choice Award. Who organized that event? That would be the Cedar Falls Historic Preservation Society. Why? Because, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. I think I know how to save my son. The Cedar Falls Historic Preservation Society met in a cramped office above the old hardware store on Main Street. I climbed the narrow stairs Saturday morning, my knees protesting every step, and found myself face to face with Thomas Brennan, the society's president, a retired insurance agent with a passion for local history and an unfortunate tendency toward bureaucratic obstruction. Mrs. Bennett, he said, looking surprised to see me. I heard about Robert. Terrible loss. Those cars of his were remarkable. Is this about a donation to the society? Because we're always grateful for— I want to organize an event, I interrupted. A classic car show and vintage vehicle exhibition. Something big enough to draw crowds from across the state. Thomas blinked. That's ambitious. May I ask why the sudden interest? I'd prepared my answer carefully. Robert's cars deserve to be seen, Mr. Brennan. They're part of Cedar Falls history, and I think an event celebrating automotive heritage would honor his memory while bringing attention to the town. Tourism, economic benefit, community engagement. He stroked his chin thoughtfully. The society did organize a successful show about 10 years ago. But Mrs. Bennett, these events take months to plan. Permits, insurance, vendor coordination, advertising. What if I told you I could make it happen in 2 weeks? His eyebrows shot up. 2 weeks? That's impossible. Difficult, I corrected. Not impossible. The society would oversee the official aspects, maintain its reputation, and take credit for the event. I'll handle the logistics, funding, and promotion. All I need from you is approval and help with the necessary permits. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. You're serious about this? Completely. May I ask what's driving this urgency? 2 weeks is an extraordinarily tight timeline. I met his gaze steadily. Let's just say I have personal reasons for wanting this to happen quickly. Reasons that don't affect the quality or legitimacy of the event. He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him weighing possibilities, calculating risks and benefits. Finally, he nodded slowly. If you can pull this together, and that's a significant if, the society would be proud to be associated with it. But Mrs. Bennett, understand that if this fails, if it reflects poorly on Cedar Falls or the society, there will be consequences. I understand. I won't let that happen. We shook hands, and I left with a tentative approval and a list of requirements that would have seemed daunting if I wasn't already operating on pure adrenaline and desperation. My next stop was the county clerk's office, where I spent 3 hours navigating the permit process. The clerk, a woman named Sandra who'd gone to high school with Robert, expedited things as much as she could when I explained I was organizing an event in my late husband's honor. By Saturday evening, I had the skeleton of a plan. A classic car show and motorsport exhibition to be held in 2 weeks at the Cedar Falls Fairgrounds. Now, I just needed to fill in everything else. Vendors, participants, promotion, and most critically, enough interest to make the event financially viable. I called Daniel that night. I need you to bring the cars to the fairgrounds next Saturday. All 3 of them. Mom, What are you planning? Something Robert would have loved. Trust me. There was a long pause. Calabrese's deadline is in 12 days. I know. That's why we're doing this in 10. Sunday morning, I discovered my first major obstacle. I'd contacted 6 local businesses about sponsorship opportunities, and 5 had politely declined. The 6th, Brennan's nephew who owned a car dealership, was more direct. Mrs. Bennett, with all due respect, I'm not investing in an event that's being thrown together in 2 weeks. That's not enough time to see a return, and frankly, it sounds like a recipe for disaster. I'd expected resistance, but the consistent rejections stung. Without sponsors, I couldn't cover the costs of advertising, insurance, and facility rental. The fairgrounds alone wanted $3,000, and I'd need at least another $5,000 for everything else. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my dwindling savings account balance, when Jamie called. "Grandma? Dad told me about the car show. Can I help?" The sound of his voice, eager and innocent, nearly broke me. "Sweetheart, this is grown-up business. I can make flyers, and I can post about it on social media. All the kids at school have Instagram and TikTok. If I make it sound cool, they'll share it." Social media. I'd barely considered it, being of a generation that still preferred newspaper ads and word of mouth. But Jamie was right. If we wanted to reach people quickly, we needed to use every tool available. "Okay," I said. "But Jamie, you can't tell anyone why we're really doing this. Not your friends, not your teachers. This is about honoring Grandpa Robert. That's the story. Understand?" "I understand." He paused. "Grandma, are we going to be okay?" The question hit me like a physical blow. This child, who should be worrying about homework and soccer practice, was asking if his family would survive. "Yes," I said, and I prayed it wasn't a lie. "We're going to be okay." Monday brought a new complication. I was at the library using their printer to make flyers when Margaret approached with an uncomfortable expression. "Margot, someone was here asking about you this morning." My blood ran cold. "What kind of someone?" "A man. 30s, expensive suit, very polite. He said he was a friend of Daniel's and was hoping to get in touch with you. He left a card." She handed it to me. Vincent Calabrese's name, embossed in black on heavy cream cardstock. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing, of course. I said I didn't give out patron information. But Margot, he made me nervous. There was something wrong about him. Too smooth. Too interested." She lowered her voice. "Is Daniel in trouble?" I wanted to lie, to protect my privacy and Daniel's. But Margaret had been my friend for 3 decades. She deserved some version of the truth. "Daniel made some poor financial choices," I said carefully. "This man is a creditor who's being aggressive about collecting. Nothing dangerous, just stressful." Margaret didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "If you need help, or if that man comes back, I'm calling the police." After she walked away, I stared at Calabrese's card. He was escalating, making his presence known, reminding me that he could reach me anywhere. The message was clear. Time was running out, and he was watching. I called Daniel immediately. Calabrese came to the library looking for me. "Jesus. Mom, maybe Lisa's right. Maybe we should just—" "No, we're not running, and we're not giving up. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to act terrified. That won't be hard. When he contacts you again, and he will, tell him you're working on getting the money. Tell him your mother might be able to help, that we're selling assets. Make him think we're scrambling and desperate. We are scrambling and desperate. Yes, but we're also planning. And I need him to not see that coming." Tuesday, things started to shift in our favor. Jamie's social media campaign gained unexpected traction. He'd posted videos of himself talking about his grandfather's cars, mixing genuine emotion with teenage enthusiasm, and something about it resonated. The posts were being shared across Pennsylvania, then into neighboring states. A classic car club in Pittsburgh reached out, interested in participating. Then another from Erie. By Wednesday, I had commitments from 23 car owners who wanted to display their vehicles, and inquiries from a dozen more. But Wednesday also brought a darker development. I was at the fairgrounds, meeting with the facilities manager to discuss layout, when Daniel called. His voice was shaking. "Mom, they're at my house, right now." Who? Calabresi's guys. Two of them. They're sitting in a car outside, just watching. Lisa's terrified. And Jamie saw them when he got home from school. Mom, they're not even trying to be subtle anymore. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. This is intimidation. They want you scared and compliant. Don't engage with them. Don't go outside and document everything. Take pictures if you can. What if they don't leave? They will. They're not going to do anything in broad daylight with witnesses around. But Daniel, this means we're running out of time faster than I thought. After I hung up, the facilities manager, a kind man named Harold who'd known Robert, asked if everything was all right. Family emergency, I said. Nothing I can't handle. But Harold was perceptive. Mrs. Bennett, I've been in this business a long time. I can spot someone under pressure. If you're having trouble covering the facility costs, we can work out a payment plan. The offer was tempting, but I couldn't risk owing anyone else money. That's generous, Harold. But I'll have the funds. I just need a few more days. He nodded, but I could see doubt in his eyes. He was wondering if this elderly woman had bitten off more than she could chew, if this whole event was going to collapse and leave him with an unpaid rental and a damaged reputation. Thursday morning, I made a decision I'd been avoiding. I called Jennifer Reeves, Margaret's daughter, the paralegal who'd advised me about loan sharks. Mrs. Bennett, how can I help you? I need to know something. Hypothetically, if someone were planning an event to raise money to pay off an illegal debt, and if that event generated enough revenue, could the creditor still claim they were owed more? Could they move the goalposts? There was a pause. This isn't hypothetical, is it? Please just answer the question. Legally, if there's a written agreement specifying the debt amount, that's binding. But if we're talking about unlicensed lenders, they often don't operate by legal standards. They could absolutely claim the debt has grown or demand more than originally agreed upon. That's part of how they maintain control. My worst fear confirmed. Even if I raised the $78,000, Calabresi might simply say it wasn't enough. Is there any way to protect against that? I asked. Get everything in writing. Record conversations if Pennsylvania's consent laws allow it. And they do, as long as one party consents. Build evidence of the original agreement. Make it harder for him to claim anything different. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the library parking lot and let myself feel, just for a moment, the full weight of how impossible this was. I was a 68-year-old widow trying to organize a major event in less than 2 weeks, to raise enough money to pay off a loan shark who might not honor any agreement we made, all while protecting a son who'd lied to me and a grandson who deserved better than this nightmare. Then I started the car and drove to the bank. My savings account held $42,000, money Robert and I had carefully accumulated over decades, emergency funds and retirement cushion. I withdrew $8,000 in cash, leaving just enough to keep the account active. The teller, a young woman I didn't recognize, counted out the bills with raised eyebrows. That's a lot of cash, ma'am. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer a cashier's check? I'm sure. With the cash in my purse, I drove to a printing company in the next town over, far enough from Cedar Falls that I wouldn't encounter anyone I knew. I ordered 500 professional-grade flyers, 24 banners, and 100 yard signs advertising the car show. The total came to $3,000. We can have these ready in 3 days, the manager said. I need them in 2. I'll pay extra. He considered, then nodded. 2 days, but that'll bring the total to $3,500. I counted out the cash without hesitation. We were committed now. There was no backing out, no changing course. We were going to make this event happen, or we were going to crash and burn spectacularly. Thursday afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Bennett, this is Vincent Calabresi. I thought we should talk. My hand tightened on the phone. I have nothing to say to you. That's unfortunate, because I have quite a bit to say to you. Your son has been very forthcoming about your little plan. A car show. How charming. The world tilted, Daniel had told him. Whether voluntarily or under pressure, my son had revealed what we were planning. I'm impressed by your initiative, Calabresi continued, his voice smooth as oil. But let's be realistic. Even if your event is wildly successful, You might raise maybe $40,000. That leaves a significant shortfall. And Mrs. Bennet, my patience is not infinite. What do you want? I want to offer you a compromise. Sign over the titles to all 3 vehicles. Once they're legally in your name, transfer them to me. I'll consider Daniel's debt paid in full, and we can all move on with our lives. Those cars are worth more than he owes you. Are they? By the time you factor in the time and expense of selling them, the uncertainty of finding buyers willing to pay top dollar, the various fees and taxes involved, I'm offering you a clean resolution, Mrs. Bennet. I suggest you consider it carefully. And if I refuse, then we continue as we are, with all the associated risks and uncertainties. You seem like an intelligent woman. I'm sure you'll make the right choice. The line went dead. I sat there shaking, rage and fear warring inside me. Calabrese knew about the event. He knew our plan. And he was confident enough to offer me what sounded like a reasonable deal, which meant he believed we'd fail. More than that, he wanted those cars specifically. Why? If he just wanted his money, he'd take cash. But he was pushing for the vehicles themselves, which meant they were worth more than he was letting on. Or they represented something beyond simple collateral. Friday morning, with 5 days left until the event and 7 days until Calabrese's deadline, disaster struck. Thomas Brennan called me, his voice tight with distress. Mrs. Bennet, we have a problem. The county insurance board has flagged your event. They're concerned about liability issues with the short timeline and the lack of established safety protocols. They're threatening to revoke the permit. Can you fix it? I'm trying, but it's Friday. These bureaucrats don't work weekends. The earliest I can meet with them is Monday morning, which gives us virtually no time before Saturday's event. So what do? We pray, Thomas said grimly. And we prepare for the possibility that this entire thing falls apart. I hung up and closed my eyes. Every obstacle I cleared revealed another one behind it. It was like fighting the ocean. No matter how hard I struggled, the tide kept pulling me back. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. They came back. 3 cars this time, just sitting there. Lisa wants to call the police. Then another text from Jamie. Grandma, people are getting excited about the show. We have 2,000 followers now. And finally, a text from an unknown number. TikTok, Mrs. Bennet. Time is running out. VC. I looked around my empty kitchen, at the home Robert and I had built, at the life we'd created through hard work and love, and I felt something shift inside me. From fear to fury, from defense to offense. Calabrese thought he had us beaten. He thought an old woman and her desperate son were easy prey. He was about to learn exactly how dangerous a grandmother could be when her family was threatened. I picked up my phone and made a call I'd been hoping to avoid. Cedar Falls Police Department, how can I help you? I need to report harassment and intimidation, and I believe I have information about illegal lending operations in the area. It was time to stop playing defense. Detective Amelia Clark was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of my high school principal. We sat in a small interview room at the Cedar Falls Police Station, a tape recorder between us on the scratch table. Mrs. Bennet, you mentioned illegal lending operations. Can you elaborate? I'd spent Friday night preparing for this moment, organizing every scrap of information I had. Now I laid it out methodically. Vincent Calabrese's business card, the loan documents I'd photographed in Daniel's garage, the timeline of harassment, the threatening phone calls. My son borrowed money from this man 18 months ago. The interest rates are criminal, literally. He's been paying $5,000 a month and barely touched the principal. Now Calabrese is threatening to take property as collateral, and he's having people watch my son's home, intimidate my family. Detective Clark made notes, her expression unreadable. Has anyone been physically harmed? Not yet, but the threat is clear. He called me directly, Detective. He knows where I live, where my grandson goes to school. He's making sure we understand what he's capable of. Mrs. Bennet, I'll be honest with you. Cases involving unlicensed lenders are complicated. If your son entered into this agreement voluntarily, he was desperate. His father was dying, and we had crushing medical debt. I understand, and I sympathize. But from a legal standpoint, your son took money knowing the terms. That makes prosecution difficult. She leaned forward. However, harassment and intimidation are different matters. If Calabrese or his associates have made explicit threats, if they've engaged in stalking or surveillance, that gives us something to work with. So what do I do? Document everything. Photos of the cars watching your son's house, recordings of phone calls if you can get them legally, written accounts of every interaction. Build a case. Then we can potentially pursue harassment charges or get a restraining order. That takes time. Time I don't have. Detective Clark studied me for a long moment. There's something you're not telling me. What's the real urgency here? I hesitated, then decided truth was my only option. Calabrese has given us a deadline. 1 week from today, he takes the cars my son used as collateral. Those cars are worth significantly more than the debt, and they're all I have left of my husband. I'm trying to raise the money through a legitimate event, a car show this Saturday. But Calabrese is doing everything he can to sabotage it, and I'm afraid that even if I succeed, he'll simply demand more money or find another way to take those vehicles. You're trying to negotiate with a loan shark while simultaneously reporting him to the police. You understand that's dangerous? I understand I'm running out of options. Detective Clark closed her notebook with a sigh. Mrs. Bennett, I'm going to be blunt. What you're describing is someone who operates in gray areas and knows how to avoid prosecution. Even if we investigate, even if we find evidence, these cases take months or years to build. Your deadline is in a week. The police can't solve this for you in that time frame. My heart sank. So you're saying there's nothing you can do? I'm saying I can't make this go away by Saturday. But I can do this. I'll have patrol units drive by your son's house regularly. If Calabrese's people see police presence, they might back off. And I'll open an investigation into his lending practices. It won't help you immediately, but it might provide leverage down the line. She pulled out her card. Call me if anything escalates. If you feel threatened, call 911 immediately. And Mrs. Bennett, be careful. Men like Calabrese don't like it when people fight back. I left the police station feeling both relieved and frustrated. I had an ally now, someone in authority who knew what was happening. But Detective Clark was right. The wheels of justice moved too slowly to save us. Saturday morning, 3 days before the event, I woke to my phone ringing at 6 a.m. Mrs. Bennett? It's Thomas Brennan. I have good news and bad news. I sat up, my heart already racing. Good news first. I convinced the insurance board to approve the permit. We're clear for the event. And the bad news? They added stipulations. We need certified EMTs on site, additional liability coverage, and a detailed safety plan filed by Thursday. That's going to cost another $4,000 minimum. $4,000 I didn't have. I'd already spent most of my liquid savings on printing and facility rental. I'll handle it, I said, though I had no idea how. After I hung up, I sat in bed and let myself feel overwhelmed for exactly 3 minutes. Then I got dressed and went to work. By Saturday afternoon, I'd called in every favor I was owed in Cedar Falls. The local fire department agreed to provide EMTs at cost. Harold at the fairgrounds found a way to reduce some fees in exchange for promotional consideration. A business owner I'd helped with a literacy program years ago donated $1,500 toward insurance. I was still $2,000 short. Sunday morning, Jamie showed up at my door with his piggy bank, literally, a ceramic pig he'd had since he was 5. Grandma, I have $463. It's yours. I stared at this beautiful child, offering me his entire savings. Jamie, I can't take your money. Grandpa would want you to have it. He always said family helps. Family? His eyes were fierce. Please, Grandma, let me help. I took the money, my vision blurring with tears, and held my grandson close. Thank you, sweetheart. I'll pay you back, I promise. I know you will. That afternoon, I did something I'd sworn I'd never do. I called my sister in Ohio, the one I hadn't spoken to in 6 years after a bitter argument about our mother's estate. Margot? Patricia's voice was shocked. Is everything all right? No. I need to borrow money. $1,500. I'll pay you back within a month. Silence stretched between us, heavy with history and hurt. Then, what's wrong? I told her everything. The medical debt, Daniel's terrible choice, the loan shark, the car show, the desperate race against time. I laid bare our family's dysfunction and desperation, asking for help from someone I'd pushed away years ago. When I finished, Patricia was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. "I'll wire you 2,000, she finally said. "And Margot, I'm sorry about Robert. I should have called when I heard." "I'm sorry too. For everything." "Family helps family," she said, echoing Jamie's words. "Let me know how the event goes." Monday morning, 4 days before the car show, I had the full amount needed for permits and insurance. But I also discovered that Calabrese had made his own move. Daniel called me, his voice hollow with shock. "Mom, I got served papers this morning. Calabrese is suing me." "What?" "He's filed a civil suit claiming I fraudulently used property I didn't own as collateral for a loan. He's demanding immediate repayment of the full amount plus damages and legal fees. The total is now $98,000. My hands went numb. How is that possible? His lawyer, and apparently he has a legitimate lawyer, claims that by using the cars as collateral when they were still in Dad's name, I committed fraud. They're saying the loan is void due to my misrepresentation, and therefore I owe the entire original amount, plus all the interest and penalties that would have accrued if the loan had been legitimate. It was brilliant and vicious. Calabrese had found a way to use the legal system itself as a weapon. Even if the case was eventually dismissed, the legal fees alone would destroy us. "There's more," Daniel continued. "The lawyer filed for an emergency hearing. It's scheduled for Wednesday morning. If the judge rules in their favor, they can seize the cars immediately. Wednesday, 2 days before our event. 3 days before Calabrese's original deadline. We need a lawyer," I said. "With what money, Mom? We're broke. Even if we had the cash, finding a lawyer and preparing a defense in 2 days is impossible." But I was already thinking, my mind racing through possibilities. Jennifer Reeves, Margaret's daughter. She's a paralegal. She knows about this case. Maybe she can help us find representation, or at least guide us through the hearing. I called Jennifer immediately. And God bless her, she didn't hesitate. "This is sleazy even for a loan shark," she said after I explained. "He's weaponizing the legal system. But Mrs. Bennett, I'm a paralegal, not a lawyer. I can't represent Daniel in court. Can you help us understand what we're facing? What we might say to the judge?" "I can do that. And I have a friend who does pro bono work for financial exploitation cases. Let me call him. No promises, but maybe he can at least appear at the hearing and ask for a continuance." Tuesday was a blur of preparation on multiple fronts. The car show logistics were coming together. 31 classic cars confirmed. Local food vendors signed up. A bluegrass band agreeing to play for exposure. Jamie's social media push had generated real buzz, with news outlets from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia expressing interest in covering the event. But Wednesday's hearing loomed over everything like a storm cloud. "Tuesday night," Jennifer called back. "Good news. My friend attorney Michael Ross will represent Daniel at tomorrow's hearing. He reviewed the case and thinks Calabrese's lawsuit is garbage. But garbage can still cause damage. He'll argue for dismissal, but worst case, he'll ask for a continuance until after your event this weekend. What happens if the judge rules in Calabrese's favor tomorrow? Then legally, he can seize the cars immediately. Game over." I barely slept Tuesday night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those beautiful vehicles being loaded onto a truck, disappearing forever, taking with them Robert's legacy and our last hope. Wednesday morning, Daniel, Lisa, and I sat in the courthouse waiting room. Michael Ross was younger than I'd hoped, maybe 35, but he had a confident bearing that was reassuring. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, keeping his voice low. "Calabrese's attorney will argue that Daniel committed fraud. I'll argue that the loan itself was illegal and therefore any collateral agreement is void. The judge will probably see through this for what it is, a strong-arm tactic by a loan shark, but that doesn't mean he'll rule in our favor." "Why not?" Lisa asked. "Because judges don't like getting involved in private financial disputes unless there's clear criminal activity. And Calabrese has been very careful to make this look like a legitimate business disagreement." Michael looked at me. "Mrs. Bennett, You're listed as an interested party since you legally own the vehicles. The judge may ask you questions. If he does, be honest, but be smart. Don't admit to anything that could be construed as conspiracy or aiding your son's fraud. The hearing was held in a small courtroom with wood paneling and fluorescent lights. Calabrese sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, a shark-faced man in an expensive suit who looked like he ate small-town families for breakfast. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Morrison, was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book. Calabrese's attorney went first, laying out a case that made Daniel sound like a con artist who deliberately deceived his client. He produced the loan documents, the agreement listing the cars as collateral, and the titles showing Robert's name. Your Honor, my client acted in good faith, loaning money to Mr. Bennett based on specific collateral that Mr. Bennett represented as his own. When we discovered that the collateral was fraudulent, my client had no choice but to seek legal remedy. We're asking the court to void the loan agreement due to fraud and award my client the full principal plus damages. Michael Ross stood, and I was impressed by how he commanded the room despite his youth. Your Honor, opposing counsel's argument is creative fiction. The loan in question was made by an unlicensed lender charging usurious interest rates that would be criminal if this were a legitimate transaction. My client's father had just died after a long illness that left the family with crushing medical debt. Mr. Calabrese exploited that vulnerability, and now he's using the legal system to extract even more money. Does your client dispute taking the loan? Judge Morrison asked. No, Your Honor. But we dispute that this was ever a legitimate loan, or that the collateral agreement has any legal standing. The entire transaction was predatory and illegal. The judge turned to Calabrese's attorney. What interest rate was charged on this loan? The terms were agreed upon by both parties, Your Honor. That's not what I asked. What was the interest rate? A flicker of discomfort crossed the attorney's face. 36% annually. 36%, the judge repeated flatly. And what is your client's lending license number? Mr. Calabrese operates as a private lender, Your Honor. He's not required to be licensed for private transactions. Interesting interpretation of the law. Judge Morrison turned to me. Mrs. Bennett, you own these vehicles? I stood, my knees shaking. Yes, Your Honor. They were my late husband's. He never transferred the titles to our son. Did you know your son was using them as collateral for this loan? This was the trap Michael had warned me about. If I said yes, I was complicit. If I said no, I made Daniel look even more deceptive. Your Honor, I said carefully, I was told that Daniel had sold the cars to pay medical bills. I learned only recently that he'd kept them. I understand why he did it. Those cars were his father's passion, and letting them go felt like erasing his memory. But no, I didn't know about the loan or the collateral agreement. Judge Morrison studied me for a long moment. Then she looked at Calabrese, who'd been sitting silently at the plaintiff's table. Mr. Calabrese, you've been named in several investigations into unlicensed lending practices. Is that correct? His attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, my client has never been charged with any crime. I asked Mr. Calabrese. The judge's voice was steel. Stand up and answer me. Calabrese stood, his expensive suit and polished appearance somehow making him look more predatory rather than less. I've been investigated, Your Honor. Never charged. I operate a legal business helping people who can't get traditional loans. At 36% interest. Market rates for high-risk lending. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair. Here's what I see. A grieving family manipulated by a predatory lender, followed by an attempt to use my court to legitimize what amounts to loan sharking. Mr. Ross, I'm inclined to dismiss this case entirely. My heart soared, but then the judge continued. However, there is the matter of your client's misrepresentation of the collateral. Even if the loan was predatory, fraud is fraud. She looked at Daniel. Mr. Bennett, did you know those cars weren't yours when you offered them as collateral? Daniel stood, and I could see him wrestling with the decision to lie or tell the truth. Finally, he said, Yes, Your Honor, but I was desperate, and I thought my mother would never know. The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison wrote something on her notepad, her expression unreadable. "Here's my ruling," she finally said. "This lawsuit is dismissed without prejudice. Mr. Calabrese, if you want to pursue civil damages for fraud, you're welcome to file a proper case with adequate notice and discovery. But this emergency hearing is clearly a pressure tactic, and I won't allow my court to be used that way." Relief flooded through me, but the judge wasn't done. "However, Mr. Bennett, you've admitted to fraud. I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges. You should consult with an attorney." She looked at me. "Mrs. Bennett, as the legal owner of the vehicles in question, you should secure them immediately to prevent any further complications." She banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." As we filed out of the courtroom, I saw Calabrese and his attorney in heated discussion. Calabrese's eyes met mine across the hallway, and the rage in them was chilling. We'd won the battle, but we hadn't won the war. The cars were safe for now, but Daniel might face criminal charges. And Calabrese, humiliated in court, thwarted by a judge who'd seen through his schemes, was now more dangerous than ever. Michael Ross pulled us aside in the hallway. "That went better than I expected, but you need to understand, Calabrese is not going to let this go." The judge essentially called him a loan shark in open court. Men like him don't forget that kind of public humiliation. "What do we do?" Lisa asked, her voice small. "You proceed with your car show," Michael said, looking at me. "You raise that money if you can, and then you pay him off and get him out of your lives before this gets worse." As we left the courthouse, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Thomas Brennan and a text. "Need you to call immediately. Emergency with the fairgrounds." It was Wednesday afternoon. The event was in 3 days, and apparently our problems were just beginning. Thomas Brennan's emergency turned out to be less catastrophic than I'd feared, though still serious. The fairgrounds' electrical system needed upgrades to handle the additional load from vendors and displays, another $1,200 and a day of work. "We can postpone," Thomas suggested, but I could hear the relief in his voice at the possibility. "We're not postponing. Find an electrician who can work tomorrow and Friday. I'll cover the cost." After I hung up, I stared at my bank balance on my phone screen. After Patricia's loan and all the expenses, I had $800 left to my name. The $1,200 for electrical work would have to come from somewhere else. I called Harold at the fairgrounds. "I need to sell raffle tickets at the event. Good ones, with the grand prize being a passenger ride in one of Robert's classic cars." "People will pay for that," Harold agreed, "especially car enthusiasts. Set the tickets at $20 each. I'll donate all 3 cars for rides throughout the day. That should generate some revenue." It wasn't enough to cover the electrical work, but it was something. I spent Wednesday evening calling every vendor scheduled to appear, confirming their commitment, and asking if they'd be willing to donate a percentage of sales to help cover event costs. Most agreed to 5%. Not much individually, but it might add up. Thursday morning, I woke to find a letter taped to my front door. No postage, no return address. Someone had delivered it by hand. Inside was a single page, typed in block letters. "Mrs. Bennett, you made a mistake in that courtroom. You embarrassed me. You cost me money and respect. Your car show will not happen. And if it does, you won't enjoy the proceeds. Back out now, give me the titles, and your family stays safe. Continue this crusade, and you'll regret it. You have until Friday night to decide." My hands trembled as I photographed the letter and immediately sent it to Detective Clark. She called me back within minutes. "This is an explicit threat. I'm sending officers to your house right now. Don't touch the letter. It's evidence." 2 police officers arrived within the hour, collected the letter, and took my statement. One of them, Officer Martinez, looked at me with genuine concern. "Ma'am, this is serious. Have you considered that maybe this event isn't worth your safety?" "My grandson put his college savings into this event," I said quietly. "My sister, who I hadn't spoken to in years, loaned me money. Business owners across Cedar Falls have invested time and resources, and my late husband's legacy is on the line. I'm not backing down because a bully wants to scare me." Martinez nodded slowly. "Then we'll have officers at the fairgrounds on Saturday. Plain clothes and uniform. If Calabrese or anyone associated with him shows up, we'll be watching." After they left, I called Daniel. Don't come to my house today. Keep Jamie home from school. I want you all somewhere Calabrese can't find you until Saturday. Mom, what happened? I told him about the letter. There was a long silence. This is my fault, Daniel finally said, his voice breaking. I did this to our family. No, a predator did this to our family. You made a mistake born from love and desperation. What we do now is what matters. I paused, then added, Daniel, I need you to do something for me. I need you to bring all 3 cars to the fairgrounds tomorrow evening. We'll keep them there overnight under police watch. Why? Because if Calabrese is going to try something, he'll do it at my house or yours. But he won't expect the cars to already be at the fairgrounds. We move first. We control the situation. Thursday afternoon, I received a call from a reporter at the Pittsburgh Tribune. Jamie's social media campaign had caught their attention, and they wanted to do a human interest story about a widow honoring her late husband's legacy through a community event. I understand your husband was passionate about classic cars, the reporter said, and that you're organizing this show in his memory while facing some financial challenges. I chose my words carefully. My husband believed that beautiful things should be shared, not hidden away. This event is about celebrating automotive history and bringing the community together. Yes, we've had some struggles, but that's what makes this meaningful. We're building something positive out of difficult circumstances. The article appeared online Thursday evening and in print Friday morning. It was perfect, heartwarming without being maudlin, focusing on Robert's passion and the community's support. It mentioned the event details and included several of Jamie's photos of the cars. By Friday afternoon, we'd sold over 300 advance tickets. Friday evening, as the sun set over Cedar Falls, Daniel drove the Shelby Mustang through the fairgrounds gates. I followed in the Chevelle, with Lisa driving the Charger and Jamie riding passenger. The 3 cars gleamed under the parking lot lights, magnificent and defiant. Harold had arranged for them to be parked in a secured area with chain-link fencing. 2 police officers would patrol the fairgrounds overnight. Your husband would be proud, Harold said to me as we secured the area. These cars deserve to be seen. I walked around each vehicle one last time, running my hand along the Charger's midnight blue hood. I could almost feel Robert standing beside me, his hand on my shoulder. I hope I'm doing the right thing, I whispered. Friday night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, convinced that Calabrese had found a way to sabotage everything. But dawn broke on Saturday morning clear and bright, and when I arrived at the fairgrounds at 6 a.m., all 3 cars were exactly where we'd left them. By 8 a.m., the vendor tents were set up. By 9, early arrivals were already browsing. And by 10, when we officially opened, there were over 200 people milling around the fairgrounds. The event was happening. Against all odds, despite every obstacle, we'd actually pulled it off. The next 6 hours passed in a blur. Classic car enthusiasts from across Pennsylvania came to admire the vehicles, share stories, and celebrate automotive history. The bluegrass band played. Food vendors sold out of everything. Jamie ran around selling raffle tickets and posing for photos beside his grandfather's cars. And the money came in. Ticket sales, vendor percentages, raffle tickets, donations from people who'd read the Tribune article and wanted to support a widow honoring her husband's memory. By 3 p.m., I found a quiet moment to step away and do the math. Thomas Brennan found me sitting at a picnic table with a calculator and a notebook full of figures. "How are we doing?" he asked. "If the rest of the afternoon continues like this morning, we'll clear about $60,000 after expenses." Thomas whistled. "That's impressive for a first-year event, especially with such short planning time." $60,000. It wasn't enough. I still needed $18,000 more to pay Calabrese, and I had no idea where it would come from. That's when I noticed the man standing by the Charger. Late 50s, expensive casual wear, examining the car with the practiced eye of a serious collector. He was taking photos, checking under the hood, running his hands along the body panels. I walked over. "Can I help you?" He looked up, smiling. "This is an exceptional vehicle. 1969. Charger RT, original 440 Magnum engine completely restored. The owner must love this car deeply. My late husband restored it himself over 10 years. I'm sorry for your loss. He did beautiful work. The man pulled out a business card. I'm James Whitmore. I own a classic car museum in Philadelphia. We specialize in muscle cars from this era. My heart began to beat faster. A museum? We're always looking for signature pieces. This Charger in particular would be perfect for our collection. If you're ever interested in selling, I'd make a very generous offer. How generous? He named a figure that made my head spin. $55,000, significantly more than I'd thought the car was worth. I'd need to see maintenance records and verify some details, he continued. But assuming everything checks out, I could have a cashier's check ready by Monday. I looked at the Charger, this beautiful machine that Robert had poured his heart into, and felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on me. Could you give me until Monday afternoon to decide? I asked. Of course. Take your time. He handed me his card. I'll be in touch. As he walked away, I stood there holding the card and trying not to cry. We'd worked so hard, fought so many battles, and now success meant choosing which piece of Robert's legacy to sacrifice. Grandma? Jamie appeared beside me. Are you okay? Just tired, sweetheart. We did it, though. Look at all these people. Everyone loves Grandpa's cars. He was right. Everywhere I looked, people were smiling, taking photos, sharing stories about their own classic cars or their father's or grandfather's vehicles. This event had become something larger than just a fundraiser. It had become a celebration of a specific kind of American history, of craftsmanship and passion, and the bonds between generations. At 4 p.m., we held the raffle drawing. The winner, a teenager who'd spent his entire savings on tickets, screamed with joy when his number was called. His prize was a passenger ride in the Shelby Mustang, and Daniel took him around the fairgrounds parking lot 3 times, while the kids' parents filmed and cried happy tears. By 5 p.m., as we began breaking down the event, Thomas Brennan approached me with a large envelope. Final count, he said. $63,427. After we pay all the vendors and settle accounts, your net should be around $58,000. $58,000. We'd raised an incredible amount, enough to prove that we could do this, that the community believed in us, that Robert's legacy mattered, but it wasn't enough to pay Calabrese. I was sitting in my car, staring at the envelope of cash and checks, when Detective Clark knocked on my window. Mrs. Bennett, we need to talk. I got out of the car, my legs stiff from the long day. Did something happen? Yes, but maybe not what you think. This morning, while your event was happening, the FBI executed search warrants at 3 locations associated with Vincent Calabrese. They've been building a case against him for 2 years. Racketeering, illegal lending, extortion. Your report last week, combined with similar complaints from other victims, gave them enough probable cause to move forward. My mind struggled to process this. The FBI? Calabrese has been operating across state lines, which makes it a federal case. They've seized his records, frozen his accounts, and arrested 2 of his associates. Calabrese himself is in custody. So, the debt? Any agreements you had with Calabrese are likely void once he's convicted. But that will take time. Months. Possibly years. In the meantime, you should consult with a lawyer about your options. Detective Clark smiled. But Mrs. Bennett, between you and me, you're probably not going to have to pay that loan shark anything. After she left, I sat in my car and let the reality sink in. We weren't safe yet. Legal processes took time, and Calabrese might make bail. But the immediate threat was gone. The monster who'd terrorized my family was in federal custody. Saturday evening, I drove to Daniel and Lisa's house. They were in the living room with Jamie, looking exhausted and shell-shocked. Did Detective Clark call you? I asked. Daniel nodded. I can't believe it. It's over? The immediate crisis is over. We still have to deal with the debt legally, and Daniel, you might still face charges for the collateral fraud. But we survived. We fought back, and we survived. Lisa started crying, deep, racking sobs of relief and release. Daniel held her while Jamie watched with wide, uncertain eyes. What about the car show money? Daniel finally asked. I told them about James Whitmore's offer for the Charger. If we sell it, combined with what we raise today, we'd have enough to be comfortable. To pay off other debts, create a cushion for legal fees, and maybe put something away for Jamie's education. No, Daniel said immediately. Those cars are yours, Mom. Dad left them to you. We can't ask you to sell them. You're not asking. I'm offering. I looked at my son, at the man he'd become despite his mistakes. But I have another idea. What if we don't sell? What if we use the cars the way we did today? I don't understand. We made $60,000 in one day by celebrating these vehicles and what they represent. What if we did this regularly? Monthly car shows during good weather. We could create a legitimate business, Bennett Classic Car Events. The cars become attractions rather than just possessions. They generate income while staying in the family. I could see the idea taking hold in Daniel's mind. We'd need permits, insurance, organization. We'd need exactly what we learned to do over the past 2 weeks. And this time we'd have months to plan instead of days. The cars would need to be properly maintained, Lisa said, her voice thoughtful. Stored correctly, transported safely. We'd hire proper help. Do it right. I looked at Jamie, who was listening with growing excitement. And someday, when you're older, these cars and this business would be yours. A real legacy, not just objects in a garage. Can I work the events? Jamie asked. Like today, selling tickets and taking photos. Of course. We're a family business now. Over the next few days, as the dust settled, we began to understand the full picture. Calabresi's arrest made regional news. The Tribune ran a follow-up to their heartwarming story about our car show, revealing that the widow they'd profiled had inadvertently helped bring down a major criminal operation by refusing to be intimidated. The publicity brought unexpected opportunities. 3 other towns contacted us about organizing similar events. A car magazine wanted to feature Robert's vehicles, and James Whitmore called to say that if we ever wanted to loan the Charger to his museum for special exhibitions, he'd pay a monthly fee. The debt itself remained complicated. Michael Ross guided us through the legal maze, explaining that Calabresi's illegal activities meant the loan agreement was void. But Daniel's admission of fraud in court created separate issues. Eventually, we negotiated a settlement with the DA's office. Daniel would pay restitution to the victims' fund being established from Calabresi's seized assets, but he'd avoid criminal charges. The restitution amount was $20,000, substantial, but manageable with the income from our new business. 3 months later, on a warm day in early spring, we held our second classic car show. This time, we had 4 months of planning, proper permits, and sponsorships from legitimate businesses. We also had a website, a social media presence managed by Jamie, and a reputation as the family that had taken down a loan shark. The event drew twice the crowd of the first show and generated over $90,000 in revenue. That evening, as the sun set over the fairgrounds and we secured Robert's cars for the night, Daniel stood beside me looking at the Charger. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it, for lying, for putting us in danger, for almost losing Dad's cars. You made mistakes, I agreed. But you made them for love, and when things got darkest, you didn't run. You faced them. We faced them together. I thought about everything we'd been through, the lies and threats, the fear and desperation, the impossible odds we'd somehow overcome. I thought about Robert and what he would say if he could see us now. Your father always said that cars are meant to be driven, not hidden away in garages. He believed that beautiful things should be shared. I put my arm around my son's shoulders. I think he'd be proud that we turned his passion into something that brings people joy and keeps our family together. And pays the bills, Daniel added with a small smile. And pays the bills. As we drove home that night, Daniel in the Mustang, Lisa in the Chevelle, me in the Charger with Jamie beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Peace. Not the peace of having no problems, but the peace of knowing that whatever problems came, we could face them together. The cars Robert had loved so much weren't just metal and chrome anymore. They were our livelihood, our legacy, and our proof that wisdom and patience and family bonds were stronger than threats or intimidation or fear. I was 68 years old, And I'd learned that age doesn't mean powerlessness. It means experience, resilience, and the kind of strategic thinking that comes from decades of solving problems and surviving crises. Calabresi had seen an elderly widow and her desperate son as easy prey. He'd miscalculated badly, because grandmothers, real grandmothers who've raised children and buried husbands and weathered storms, don't break easily. We bend, we strategize, we adapt. And when our families are threatened, we become absolutely relentless. The cars gleamed in my rearview mirror, following me home through the twilight. Robert's legacy, transformed from a burden into a blessing. We'd survived. More than that, we'd won. And the victory was all the sweeter because we'd earned it through intelligence, determination, and love. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.